Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Fun Ways to Keep Kids Learning this summer. I'm Jasmine Hood Miller. I have the privilege of leading our family's outreach team and working with parents, educators, and community partners to ensure we're all doing our part to empower kids to succeed and thrive when using media and technology. For those who may not know us, Common Sense Media is a nonprofit organization providing the independent and trustworthy information families, educators, policymakers, and industry leaders need to help the young people in our lives make healthy media choices and navigate online safely and responsibly. This evening's webinar is a preview of our newly launched Family and Community Engagement Program, which supports family and school connection amongst the grown-ups in kids' lives to make the most of media and tech together. We'll get into more details about the program later because I want to jump right into the discussion. I also want to add that I am a mom of 3, ages 9 and younger, and we are counting down to summer break in our house already. So that's why I'm excited for tonight's discussion. And now, without further ado, I am so pleased to introduce our special guest joining us, 2 of my fave colleagues, Jamie Nunez, Western Regional Manager for Common Sense Education, and Bianca De Jesus, Editor for Learning Content at Common Sense. Welcome, Jamie and Bianca.
Jasmine, happy Wednesday to you. It's a pleasure to be here. So, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. Really appreciate you spending the next 30 minutes with us.
Yeah. So let's talk summer fun with tech and tips, and keeping kids learning throughout the summer, because it can be a thing without having your kids completely vegging out. But before we go there and share resources, let's chat a little bit about how kids learn and typically what happens during the summer when it comes to learning. Jamie, you were a school administrator and you work closely with educators and families across the country to help them leverage technology for learning. So first, is summer slide real? And more importantly, is it inevitable? And how can parents help mitigate any learning loss or support their students in retaining what they've learned during the school year?
All right, lots of really deep questions. Thanks, Jasmine. I appreciate that. And thanks for sharing the slides, Bianca. Let me attempt to give you a narrative, a counter narrative to what we see in education during the summertime. The hope here is that as parents or as school leaders, you think differently about what summer learning loss, that word triggers so many things for me, but the gaps in learning when a child leaves school before they return back to school. Next slide. And what I want to do is I want to frame it under 3 things that we normally see. So as we think about tech use, it's really important to understand what happens, what these gaps and how these gaps actually occur for our kids during the summertime. So we know that historically, if you are a student at a public school, you are being assessed at the very tail end of the year. And part of that assessment and part of that then re-entry into the school year is often based on 3 areas. We know that literacy is a really big factor. We know that math assessments often determine funding and assessments for the following year. And we also know that writing is a really big piece. But the idea here is not to think about gaps or loss as a deficit, but rather to think about what those skills actually entail. And so here's what we do know, that summer learning we tend to see our kids reading less. And so our kids tend to be outside or they tend to engage in other activities, and reading often takes a hit. We know that sometimes experiencing writing and the stagnation behind writing, meaning kids aren't writing and regularly practicing their writing skills, we seem to notice that becomes very stagnant during the summer. And then finally, I think when we talk about subjects like math, the gap here is really that our kids are not practicing those and not applying some of those preset knowledges that they've learned. So if a child sort of learn the sequence between addition to subtraction to then multiplication, all that is based on a sequence of reasoning. We don't see that happen in the summertime. And so the idea here, the hope is that as you think about EdTech tools, which we'll get into now, that you look at these under this type of framework where you're encouraging kids to participate in some of these gaps. So next slide. I'm going to give you some sort of a foundation before I turn it over to Bianca in terms of what that actually can look like, and then we can go from there. So I'd say the first recommendation, the first sort of incorporation of Edtech tools in summer is the idea that we want to keep our kids actually reading. And so here's some really basic ways you can do that. First, we have at Common Sense a wonderful rating and reviewing system that we've sort of curated for a number of years now. I encourage you to look at that rating system that we have and think, what does my child actually enjoy doing? The second thing is I highly encourage you to look at and leverage library lists that occur at your school's, at your son or daughter's school's library. And then finally, I want to encourage you to think about how you can gamify these reading experiences. I know local libraries have these journey maps that go on, but the EdTech tool here and the reference that I want to make here is to make sure that you're aligning whatever reading that your child is actually doing to things that they both like and that are developmentally appropriate. All right, that's the next one. The next one around EdTech really is this idea that we want to ensure that our kids are practicing active reading or writing skills. And what I want to encourage with these tools is this idea that we want to document our summer experiences. So whether your child is home all day or whether they're in the park, the hope here is that you can begin to document and have your child document visually through auditory engagement, and then write and reflect about those experiences. And Bianca will go through some specific tools. I just want to highlight one. One of our Common Sense selections is Book Creator. They've done a great job as a tool to help kids and families and educators design readily sort of accessible books that they can create for themselves. So the child then at the end of the summer has a number of experiences that they write about and they feel proud about by creating them. I don't know, Bianca, at some point I'll probably tag you to figure out like if that's a proper EdTech tool, but I've used it personally in my own family's case, and it does wonders to help instill a sense of writing without feeling overwhelming. So, and then let me give you a third one before I turn it over to Bianca that I think would be helpful. So we talked a lot about reading. We talked a lot about diversifying, creating experiences, writing experiences using some of these tools. I think I want to encourage you all to think about how you create critical thinking moments in your household. And so one of the really unique ways, or one of the ways in which you can do that is to incorporate what I sort of term these focused activities or critical thinking moments. And what I would encourage is that for you to start a problem of the day, some type of experience where you are teaching your child critical thinking skills. They are incorporating prior knowledge. So if that's a math problem of the day, they're thinking about what lessons that they learned either in school. And probably the most important in all this is you invite kids to explain their methods. And what I've linked up for you on this slide is some really great tools that Bianca will likely highlight over, but a number of tools that can help your child and games that help your child think broadly about critical thinking skills that incorporate critical thinking skills. Sorry, Jasmine, a little long-winded, but that's sort of the attempt here, right? We encourage reading in a different way. We document experiences by writing and incorporating visuals and multimedia, and then we create moments where we are instilling critical thinking skills that help to reason them.
No, that's great. Thank you, Jamie. Out of all of those things, and I think that those are some really rich tools that you and strategies that you just gave us. And I know Bianca's going to dive a little bit deeper. Is there any like one tip or suggestion you may have for families on just managing and balancing tech use over the summer months?
That's a great question. I think about that in two sort of facets. One is helping families to think differently about the amount of time kids are spending. So we at Common Sense talk a lot about media balance and how we need to balance out our time offline with experiences online. But what I would suggest first is as a family, to think about how you're talking to your kids about the time that they're spending online. So sort of suspend the idea that your child has limitations behind what it is that they're doing, and think more critically or broadly about what it is that they do when they experience those aspects online. So really focus in on not only how much time you're spending or what our kids are actually doing online. And then the third one is, or the second sort of facet that I would recommend families do is encourage your child to explain to you what it is that they do online. Really have those conversations. Now, if you're sort of like laughing at me and saying like, Jamie, there's no way in hell I'm going to have my child explain that TikTok video again. That's really not the point. The point is that you want to create a conversation with your child so they can think about how they're using technology. So again, think about what media balance looks like for your family, thinking closely about how they're using tech. And then the second is having them explain the reasons why they use tech and engage in what it is that they do.
Thanks, Jamie. Those are some really great insights. And an important part of teaching balance and digital well-being is making sure that families and schools are connected to share strategies. Bianca, what are some tools you recommend for parents who want to use tech for learning?
We have some lists that we've prepared for all of you today. I just kind of want to talk through the resources that are available on our site for all of you. We're going to play a little bit of this video just so you can get a sense of some of the things that we look for when we're assessing a tool.
Can you hear it?
Yes.
Help parents and caregivers find apps and websites that are really good for learning. Number 1, consider what you'd like your child to learn. Are you interested in supporting school subjects like math and reading? Or maybe creativity and emotional awareness are more important to you? Once you have a learning focus in mind, it's easier to narrow down the options. Common Sense's lists of best apps for learning are a great place to find hand-selected picks.
Great. So we have some other reasons listed out in this app, and in this video that we're going to send out to you after. So if you want to take a look at the rest of that, you're more than welcome to. And we can go on to the next slide so I can dig into some of the lists that we just mentioned in this video. So one of the things that we do from our side is create these hand-curated lists that are based on different subjects. So the few that we have listed out here, we have some for reading, literacy, and math games, math games for preschool and kindergarten, adaptive math games, ones that are just for geometry, and so forth. So we spend a lot of time deciding how to curate these lists and the tools that go on it. So if we just click on one of them, we can click on the first one, like websites for reading, literacy, and math games, just so you can see what that looks like from our side. So these are lists that we constantly update with new tools. And for each of those tools, what we're doing, I know Jamie likes to hear this, so I'll tell him again for the 20th time. What we do with each of these tools, we assign them out to independent reviewers that take a look at it. They assess the tools for their engagement, their pedagogy, and their supports. Those are the 3 big areas that we look at to say, are these tools appropriate for students? And in what capacities. So if you just click on ABCUI, the first one that's on there, just so we can take a look at what the full review looks like. We do this essentially to save you time. It looks a little bit long, but don't be intimidated by that. We have our learning rating here. That is just, that's from our side. So that's what we're calling our expert reviews. And then we also have a community rating, which is a rating that comes from people just like you who use the tools and just write in to tell us about their experience using them. You can see we also have the grades listed, so you can find something that's really appropriate for your specific child. And then we explain what the tool is, specifically how teachers can teach with this tool, but essentially, you can adapt that to just say, how can my student learn with this tool? And then also, is it good for learning? So just overall, if you want to get to the basics of it, is it something that's going to be, something that students can learn from? And just like I said, we have the engagement, pedagogy, and support scores there if you just want a little snippet of what the tool is like. But just like Jamie said, and we talked about earlier, your best bet is, of course, going to be to try the tool yourself and see what it's like before you have your child use it. We can go back to the presentation. Jasmine, thank you. We can go to the next one.
The next list? Or
the next slide.
Okay.
Thank you. We don't have to click on these. You kind of see what the lists are like, but these are other examples of what we have. So literacy and arts, you can kind of define the subject area that you're looking for, and chances are we have a list for that. And if we don't, feel free to reach out to me at any point, or if there's a tool that you think is worth reviewing that we haven't taken a look at, you can also send those over to us and we can take a look at those for you. You can go on to the next slide, please. I just want to take this time to also talk about common sense selections for learning. You can click on the selections here, but essentially what these are tools that have passed a really rigorous review by our team and have been chosen for because they're transformative learning tools. So we have Desmos, Common Lit, like you see here, but a bunch of them that we picked throughout the year that really stand out in those areas that we were talking about, in engagement, in pedagogy, things that you know, these are the ones that I like to say I recommend to my family. You know, if I'm going through a tool and I say, okay, this is something that's really helpful, that you're going to find those tools here. And again, with this collection, we update these pretty regularly. Dreambox Learning Math is one that I was almost going to go into today, just in terms of being a really good math app for kids, but that's something that you can dig into. A lot of these are free, or we list, you know, the pricing structures for those. Okay, we can go on to the next slide in the deck, please. This is just one that I wanted to highlight. It's really cool. It's something that I know I would have liked to use as a kid. This is PBS Kids. It has a ton of different apps. You can click on this once you get the deck, but essentially there's a bunch of different, or if you want to click on it now, Jasmine, you can click on, so PBS Games is one section where you have a bunch of different games. You can scroll down here and you'll see that you can select them by subject. So if you scroll down even more, you have more topics. So if you don't, you know, if you want your kids to learn about animals or nature, you can go there. But if you're looking for something like measurement games, or if you want them to create games, or you want them to work on math skills, you can click on all those different topics and it's going to come up with a bunch of different game possibilities. And they're all really fun and cool. And we also have a review of this site on our site. So if you want to take a look at some of the things that you can expect there, you can do that. This is also available on the web, so you can use it on your iPad, or if on a mobile device. And then if we go back to the slide really quick.
This is one that my youngest is a big fan of, the PBS Kids.
Yeah, it's really fun. If you click on the part that says apps. So while what I just showed you, those games are available on web, these are separate apps that you could download. So as you can see, there's a ton of content here. I was excited to share this because I feel like it's just a treasure trove of things that you can use and pull from. And chances are your kids are already probably watching some of these shows or would soon become fans of these shows. But it's not just, you know, mindless entertainment. It has some really good pedagogy behind a lot of these games. So these are some apps that you can download separately. And we can go back to the presentation. And we can go on to the next slide. So all of this information you can find on the commonsense.org/education. If you look at this green bar up here where it says apps and websites for learning, that's where you're going to find these different sections. So you're going to find our lists that are, you know, curated based on subject. You're going to find our selections that are really the highlights of those. And then you can just find a massive list of all of our the apps that we've reviewed. We've reviewed literally thousands of them, so it's a lot to dig through, but we have some filters on the side there. So if there's anything specific that you're looking for, that's a great place to check that out. Thanks.
Thank you, Bianca. So we are getting close to time. We want to take a few questions if there are any, but there's a question that we want to pose to you all just to think about as we've shared some of just, you know, insights from Jamie and some really great tools from Bianca. Maybe what are 3 things that you can practice with your kids this summer based on what you've heard this evening? So that is something for just, you know, for you to ponder on. And I'm going to check our Q&A to see if we have any questions here. Someone asked about the ages that we cover. So our reviews and our family advice goes from preschool through 12. So we have a little something for everyone at each age level, and you should be able to find that both in our media ratings and reviews, as well as our educational technology reviews. And there were some other questions there that may have already been answered. Let's see. I think we touched on how many hours of tech kids are getting in the summer. Jamie talked about, you know, not so much screen time and in the quantity of time, but the quality of time. And so that's something that we're a big, you know, big advocate of helping families think through, you know, how are their kids spending their time online? Is it passive, or is it really, you know, engaging and interactive? And I know for my own children, like I have to, you know, kind of stop and think like, okay, are you just sitting there scrolling or just, you know, watching YouTube, or are you actually like creating something or learning something? It maybe it could even be a podcast that they're listening to. So there are a lot of different ways that you can be using the time, but the quality of that time is what's really important.
And let's also be gracious, I think. I mean, just it's been a long year, right, for our kids, and I'm certainly not advocating for you to just like give them the iPad, but it's all right, you know, if something, you know, they spend just a little extra time one day and they don't another day, like we don't need to be so stringent on the amount of time. I cannot stress this. And I say that as long as as long as you also create those parameters and the expectations you have when they're using their device. So sorry, I feel like the father, like saying it's okay, everyone. So I'm right there with you all. You got this.
Let's see, let's try one more question. Says this doesn't really have to do with learning activities, but how can families handle differing technology rules and expectations when staying as guests in another household? You want to take that?
I would probably, if I would set the expectation that when your child is with another parent, that prior to them going over, you just set the expectation about what your child should and shouldn't be doing online, and reinforce really your own guidelines, your own values as a family. I think that that's key. I think whether or not that's respected or not is another conversation, but it's up to you as a parent to share that need with families or that child. Now your child might hate you for the next 5 or 10 years to say, why did you embarrass me, parent? But really it's folks just have all sorts of different ways in which they engage with technology. So it's just clear to be transparent about your values.
Okay, yes. So I think that we can kind of wrap here. This has been super helpful. And, you know, if you are a parent or family member and you'd like your child's school to offer resources like tonight's webinar, we'd love to work with your school. You can find more information about our family engagement program that I mentioned earlier at commonsense.org/face. Feel free to pass that along to the parent coordinator, PTA person, or any other teacher or administrator at your school. And finally, I'd like to just take a moment to thank Jamie and Bianca for joining us this evening to share helpful tips and strategies. I'd also like to give a shout out to my colleagues, Vicki and Lisa behind the scenes, who have been helping out. Lisa also runs another great program at Common Sense and will be hosting a similar session next Tuesday, May 21st. And then just as a final reminder, you will receive the recording and the slides from this evening's presentation, and it'll include all of the links that Bianca went through and Jamie and all the resources that were shared. So thank you again for tuning in. Have a good evening and a fun summer, everyone.
Thanks, Jasmine. Thanks, Bianca.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.